Hey there, this is Josh. Welcome back to All Flutes Plus here in London. And today on Demystifying Flutes, we are going to talk a little bit about how to take care of your instrument. It's very important to keep your instrument clean, obviously for reasons pertaining both to the instrument itself, to keep it functioning properly, but also for health reasons, because it can actually be quite dangerous to allow a lot of moisture and bacteria to build up in your flute. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what happens when you're done playing your instrument. So let's say you've just practiced for, a half hour, an hour or so, and you're ready to put your flute away. Before you put your flute away, you want to swab your flute out. So you're going to take the head joint off of the instrument, and you are going to take the cleaning rod and cleaning cloth that most likely came with your instrument. You're going to thread the cloth through the hole in the end of your cleaning rod, wrap the cloth around the end so that the wood is not exposed, and then you're just simply going to exert it into the end of your head joint right until you hit that cork plate, and you're just going to spin it a few times to dry out that moisture inside the instrument. So after you've got your head joint dried and put away in the case, we move on to the body of the flute. So we are going to start with the foot joint. We'll just lay this aside for a second. The foot joint usually is not going to have any moisture in it unless you've been playing for quite a long time. And all you want to do is take the same cleaning rod and cloth that you used for your head joint, insert it in one end of the foot joint, and push it straight through. And you're all dry. And then we'll move on to the body. And you'll do the same thing with the body that you did with the foot joint. It's important to remember to just, whichever way you decide to clean your flute, only push the swab through one way. I usually start at the barrel end because that's the end that's closest to the head joint, and this is the part of the body that's most likely to have moisture inside it. So you just insert your cleaning rod, your case magically closes itself, and you pull it through. And there you go. Your flute is all dry and ready to go to bed. Next thing I want to talk to you about is polishing your flute. If you're anything like me, the sight of fingerprints on your flute makes you absolutely crazy. So every flutist needs to have in their little toolkit a microfiber polishing cloth. You can buy these here at All Flutes Plus. Your flute will likely have come with one. They're absolutely essential for keeping your flute clean and sparkly and shiny. So I like to start with the head joint because that tends to be where you see the most stuff, especially on the lip plate. Especially if you have facial hair, just lay it gently in the cloth, just like a jeweler on TV. Just give it a gentle but firm rub until you see all of those marks disappear, and it's all shiny. When you're putting your flute away or taking it out of the case, it's very important to remember never to grab it by the keys or the lip plate. So nearly all flute cases have some clearance here where the tube of the flute rises above the edge of the case. So when I put my head joint away, I like to put my finger just in the end a little bit, and hold it by the head joint, slide the head joint in, and just pop it in. There you go. And when you're taking the flute out, put your finger in the end here, and lift it out by the ends. You never want to grab it by the keywork when you're taking it out of the case. And the same goes when you're polishing the flute. You never want to grab the keys and press them very firmly. You just want to gently hold the flute, but firmly enough so that you don't drop it, because that would be worse. And then just gently polish the flute. And just gently rub the keys. I like to support the bottom of the G-sharp key when I'm rubbing it. It's because it is possible to bend that key, and you don't want to do that. Cleaning your tenons is probably the most important part of polishing your flute, because this is called the tenon, by the way, the sleeve that slides into the other part of the flute. Dirt and grease can build up on these tenons, and they can actually cause your flute to become stuck together. You can bend the flute that way. If a lot of dirt and grease builds up on your tenon, it becomes very difficult to take apart, and a lot of terrible things. I've seen people tear the keys completely off their flute because it was so difficult to take apart. So you never want that to happen. So you always, when you're done playing, just want to give a quick wipe around the tenon, and I always do it inside the barrel as well. You want to do both surfaces that come into contact with each other. And then we're going to do the same thing with our foot joint. Just very gently take your cloth, cradle it, and just give it a little polish. And gently, by the ends, place it back in the case. It's really important for me to polish my flute on a regular basis. I actually do it every day because I play a silver instrument. And silver, as you all know, is very prone to tarnishing. Tarnishing is actually a chemical process where silver and sulfur interact. So anytime you see that black stuff on your instrument, that is a result of a chemical reaction with sulfur. And it actually produces the same chemical that's responsible for the smell of rotten eggs. So if you have a very badly tarnished flute, you can actually smell the tarnish on your hands, and it's not terribly pleasant. But it's also very easy to remove tarnish. So if you have a solid silver instrument and you notice it's starting to look a little dull, or maybe starting to turn sort of brown or black in certain places, a silver polishing cloth will probably be the ticket there. It's really important to not use a silver polishing cloth on a silver plated instrument, because there is a bit of an abrasive compound embedded in the cloth, and on a silver plated instrument, it can actually remove the plating from the flute over time. But this isn't to worry on a solid silver instrument. And this, using one of these every couple of weeks or once a month or so, will keep tarnish from building up on your instrument in the first place. As will making sure that you wash your hands before and after you play, especially if you've eaten any food that has a lot of onions or garlic in it. Those foods tend to cause your body to secrete a lot of sulfur because they have a lot of sulfur in them. It's also very important to never put rubber bands in your case if you have a silver flute, or any flute, because rubber bands have an exceptionally high amount of sulfur in them, and they will almost instantly tarnish your flute. I mean, we're talking in the matter of 2 or 3 days. Anywhere the rubber band has touched your instrument, it will blacken. So you really want to make sure not to do that. It is also very important that you never take one of those fluffy swab things and leave it inside the flute in the case. All that does is trap moisture inside the flute, and it will cause mold and mildew to grow on your pads. And it, in some occasions, has actually led to very bad respiratory infections because you're breathing in these mold spores and bacteria. So never put the fluffy thing in your instrument and leave it in the case. It is really important to allow your pads to fully dry, which is why you can't leave one of those inside, because when a pad gets wet, it stays wet unless it is allowed to dry with air circulation. And a wet pad will tear much more easily, and the only way to fix it at that point is to completely change it, and a repad on a flute can be very expensive. It is also vitally important that you put your flute away when you're done practicing. I know a lot of people like to just leave it together so you can just grab it and play it really quickly. Don't do that, because the odds of something happening to it are far greater than the small amount of convenience you gain by not putting it away. You can knock it over. Sometimes I've seen people sit on them accidentally. You know, if you have pets or young children running around, it can just be terrible for the instrument. And also, if you leave the instrument together for too long, particularly if you have a solid silver or solid gold or solid platinum instrument, or gold plated even, the joints can actually fuse together and it becomes impossible to take the flute apart. So I would highly recommend that every time you play, take the flute apart, clean the tenons, swab it out so that it's extra dry. Make sure that when you look inside the flute, you can't see any droplets of moisture. All of these products you can purchase at All Flutes Plus in the shop, or online at allflutesplus.co.uk. And there's a huge variation in a lot of these cloths. I am particularly fond of the cloths made by Beaumont Music, which they sell here at All Flutes Plus. And you can get them in a huge range of colors and patterns. They make a really fantastic charcoal impregnated bamboo fiber cloth, which is very, very soft. And the activated charcoal is actually antibacterial. So it keeps your cloth from getting mildewy, and they dry very quickly. But whether you want sort of a color coordinated pattern situation, or you're fine with basic white or black, it is really important to have several microfiber cloths, really. I don't think I ever have fewer than 3 or 4 going, because they do get damp, and you want to make sure that you're not using a wet cloth to wipe your flute. You want to allow them to dry completely, so it's just nice to have a few. And plus it's fun to have, different colors for different outfits. So between the polishing cloths and the silver cloth and a cleaning rod and an interior swab, that's everything you need on a basic level to take care of your flute. To prevent tarnish, there are also anti-tarnish strips that you can purchase. Most of them are made by 3M, and so they're just tiny little strips of black, specially treated paper that you lay in the bottom of your case that absorb a lot of the moisture and any sulfur that might be present in the air inside the case, which prevents your flute from tarnishing. For people who have maybe a little more money to spend or want something a little fancier than just a cloth on a stick, there's also the Valentino flute wand. Now, I actually have one of these myself. I really, really like it. And it is a specially shaped, super absorbent felt that is shaped so that when you insert it into your head joint, just give it a twist, and it cleans the entire head joint at once. And because it has corners, it gets right up next to the cork plate and just pulls all the moisture out with it. These are a bit more expensive than your standard cleaning cloth, but they're really, really effective. I've had mine now for probably 9 years, and it still looks as good as it did the day I bought it. As we've recently discussed, it is very important that your pads be dry when you put your flute away. My favorite thing to use to keep your pads dry is the BG pad dryer, and it is a specially shaped piece of cloth that is specially designed for maximum absorbency. And all you do when you're done playing is insert it under the pad, gently close the key on it for a few seconds, lift the key and remove it. It is important, though, that you never drag it, never push the key down and then pull it out, because that is a one-way ticket to a ripped pad and an expensive repair job. So never clamp and pull anything, even the cigarette paper. I mean, you're more likely to tear the paper than the pad, but it's just a really good idea to never, ever drag anything from under your key. Always just sort of lightly tamp the key down, and then make sure that the key is up before you pull your pad dryer out. And you can add years to the life of your pads by making sure that they are always dry before you put your flute away. And that is how you take care of your flute.